Hello and welcome to the Final Straight F1 podcast. Again with me, Ben, and Tonda.
And today, we're looking at the story of the Japanese Grand Prix.
Let's begin.
Well, what did you think?
Well, I think the weekend overall has been pretty interesting. I think we had, except for the FP2, I think we had a solid weekend. That is for qualifying, that is for the race. The race actually was pretty good. And I think that, the funny thing that came was even FP1, right? In FP1, we had Alex Albon and Logan Sargent on the track. And guess what? Logan Sargent crashed the chassis.
Yeah.
Crazy. Williams can't get a break. And then we had Alex Albon crashing in the race. So I just thought Williams is just, I don't know, they're having a lot of trouble because of the lack of spare chassis. What did you think of this?
No, definitely. I mean, we talked about this last time, right? About the struggles at Williams and this decision to give Logan's car to Alexander Albon for the race. And I mean, he was P12 or something, so I don't know, it was a little controversial last time. And then Logan Sargent went and crashed in FP1, which definitely didn't help his chances. And then Albon goes and crashes on the first lap with Ricardo. I mean, the Williams mechanics must be working overtime, and it's tough. I've read that they're sending the car back to the factory before China.
Oh, yeah. All right.
And I mean, China is a sprint race weekend. So,
is it? Okay.
Yep. And even more opportunities to crash the car, which just seems like the usual weekend for the Williams team right now, which is very unfortunate. I mean, what is it though? Is the car just that hard to drive? Is it just the drivers being unlucky? I mean, I don't know what to make of it, to be honest.
It's interesting. I think in terms of Logan Sargent, it was, from my perspective, it was clearly just his fault, right? He crashed it, he lost the car, he put his wheels on the grass, and I think a similar mistake was done by Robert Kubica, right, in Williams, coincidentally, a few years ago. But funnily enough, he just came out of the car and he said that it was not a silly mistake, these things happen. It's do they? Should they happen to you right now? And as you said, their mechanics, they must have been, they have full timesheets just all over the moon. But it's crazy. I think in terms of Albon, I don't think it was his fault in the lap 1 incident. It was unfortunate because when you look at Ricardo's onboard, he was looking to the left side of the track because he had, I think it was Lance Stroll, just being very, very close. So with Stroll, you never know if he's going to send it or not. Mainly in lap 1 from, not a great position. Aston clearly a much faster car than the V-Carb. But it's not an easy position to be in, mainly for James Vowles right now. I think he seemed pretty chill when you just looked at his interviews and everything, but they have a tough job for China. They must hope that there's nothing wrong fundamentally with the car.
Yeah. No, and I think it's also interesting how quickly the public perception of Williams changed in the past few races. I mean, of course, the F1 world has, a very short memory. Everybody only remembers your last race. But with the way they handled the Logan and Albon situation, with the broken car, now with the troubles that are just stacking on, I feel like some people are definitely turning away from the team. I don't know if that's a big trend, but I've definitely seen some people on social media hating on the Williams team more than last year, let's say, because I guess they're more in the spotlight now as well. But I feel like people really wanted to see this upwards trajectory after some of their successes last year, with them being kind of the underdog with little to no funding, only no spare chassis. But so far, it looks like, Haas is, for example, is doing much better. The RB team, especially Yuki Tsunoda, who
Oh, yeah.
we should point out that he got his first point at Suzuka this past.
He never got points
Yeah.
before,
No.
like in Suzuka. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
And that
in
was a
F1.
good point, though.
In F1.
Yeah, of course. But
Yeah.
wow. I mean, Yuki Tsunoda is delivering.
Yeah.
Like, say what you will, but right now it's not looking great for Ricardo. And I think everybody knows it, right? Like, when you look
Yeah.
at the camera guys, they're just pointing at Liam Lawson all the time.
Very
When
funny.
Ricardo had the spin, they just pointed straight to Lawson. When Ricardo crashed, guess who they pointed at? When there was the red flag. Yeah, I think Ricardo's weekend was really strange because on one hand, like, he only had FP3, right? Because FP2 was you couldn't get any data, basically. There was no dry running pretty much, and the conditions were off and the grip was not there. So you cannot really set up the car. But when you look at, the qualifying, it was so close with Tsunoda. It was like 500ths, right? So, like, personally, I was thinking, like, okay, that's, like, of course, for Ricardo, it must be feeling terrible because, like, you lost to Tsunoda, you need to be beating. But under the circumstances of this weekend, it was a good, solid result. But then you had the turn one, and the V-carbs or RBs or whatever you want to call them, they both had a terrible start, funnily enough. And I think they had a lot of drivers behind who were on softs. But still, like, you had Tsunoda and Ricardo side by side, then this was a mistake that could have easily been avoided. And I think that if the race went on, then you would have a much better comparison of Ricardo. And right now it's just 4-0 for Tsunoda.
Because Ricardo I feel like there really is a combination of, him struggling with the car and bad luck with this incident with Albon. But yeah, it's definitely not helping his future because, the Red Bull seat for next year has been a big question in terms of, is Perez getting a contract renewal? Is Yuki Tsunoda going there? At some point it was Ricardo is definitely going, but then the season started and now people are like losing hope in Ricardo once again after his stint in McLaren. People were getting kind of disappointed back then as well, but now he came back, replacing Nick de Vries last year, but then he broke his wrist. He has really been he really has pulled the short end of the stick many times in the past few months, and it's not helping his future, and especially his confidence.
Yeah, and you can see it on his, interviews, on his face all the time. Like, the smile is not as big as it used to be. You see the, glimpse into his McLaren days a little bit more again. Because he said himself, like, the car, he wasn't really happy with the, Alpha Tauri of last year. And he said the car has, like, despite looking quite different, it has not changed that much. The key characteristics just have stayed. And, Tsunoda has had, from 2021 to just get used to the car, to get used to the, philosophy of how Alpha Tauri works or V-Carb works. So he had a lot more time just to, get in and to get comfortable with the car. Ricardo had a terrible car, in 2022, 2023, kind of. But it just seems like frustration is occurring at Ricardo's. He's not getting in a good place right now, but we'll see. I mean, he's someone who we want to see in Formula One because we remember the days of, like, for example, right, China 2018. We had amazing masterclass from Ricardo. I think it was after Monaco in 2018, if you remember. We had after 6 races, we had Vettel, Hamilton, and Ricardo. They were all 3 were on 2 wins each after 6 rounds, and you were thinking, okay, well, like, this is going to be an interesting championship, right? Because we all knew that Ricardo had it in him to compete with these guys, and at that time, funnily enough, Verstappen was being considered to be, like, there were so many memes that he's going to be dropped to Alpha Tauri and everything, and, like, it's the times have changed a lot, and I think Ricardo he has it in him, but yeah, is he just not seeming to get? I don't know if it's the pressure or it's crazy though, because he never used to crumble under pressure. So that is a super strange start to a season.
Yeah. I mean, tides turn fast in F1, but especially when going up against Yuki Tsunoda now, who has had an amazing start to the season, getting 6 points in Australia, getting a point now. And, he might be a contender for the Aston Martin seat, for example.
Yeah, because of Honda, right?
Because with the Honda partnership. I mean, but he is really also showing that he's growing as a driver. Of course, there was the incident in Bahrain after the end of the race, which was kind of strange. But overall, he just seems very solid and very consistent and kind of more at one with the car than Ricciardo. And, I mean, going back to what you said about wanting to see Ricciardo in F1, I feel like it's true, and a lot of people do want that, but I feel like there's also a lot of arguments for, getting rid, and not getting rid, but kind of giving more space to these young drivers, these rising drivers, because we have drivers who have been on the field for 10 years, maybe even longer. And some people do question whether they should be kept or whether, new blood should be let in, like Liam Lawson, Ollie Behrman, Iwasa.
100%.
But you have people, and the people I'm naming I'm not throwing any shade here, but, like Ricardo, Hulkenberg, Magnussen, Bottas, and people who have been driving for a long time. And they're good drivers, but it just feels like with 20 cars on the grid, and, there's not enough space for new talent.
Yep, feels like there's not enough seats for all these people. And, thinking of Liam Lawson, right? Like, first thing, for some reason, you look like Liam Lawson looking at you right now. That is a funny thing to say, so we might have to start,
if I can drive like him.
We might have to start marketing that, It'd be a good thing. Good clickbait. But yeah, I mean, if you look at Liam Lawson, right, we're trying to make the excuse that Ricciardo maybe didn't have practice, etc., etc. Yeah. But if you look at last year, Lawson just came in and he beat Tsunoda in Singapore. Like, he had like zero practice in F1, in terms of like preseason tests, blah blah blah. So, and he was, I think he beat, in the next race was Japan, and he beat Tsunoda too in his home race, and might have even gone a point or something like that, because and you're just thinking, like, if he just had the right practice, if he had the contract, if he had the whole season, like, I think Liam Lawson is like one of the hot prospects, and rumors say that he has been promised a 2025 seat by Helmut Marko.
Well, so, Helmut Marko has been saying that. I think last week there were articles about like, oh, Ricciardo has two weeks. He has 2 races to improve, or we're dropping him for Liam Lawson. And yeah, the Red Bull family has always been very ruthless when it came to this. And there's a question, I mean, do you think that they're keeping Perez for 2025?
Well, it's a difficult one, because if you look at the VCARB seats or the RB seats, I think there's good arguments that there cannot be the same lineup next year again, right? Because you have Tsunoda, who already is, I think, in his 2021, 2, 3, 4, in his 4th season with the RB. And going into the 5th season, it makes no sense.
Yep.
It's you have to, like the philosophy that Red Bull has, it's either to step up to Red Bull or just be gone, You've never seen drivers being in AlphaTauri, Toro Rosso, or in RB for too long. So I think that this year is really the decision point of who goes to Red Bull, if anyone, because Perez right now has been doing a pretty good job. Like, we're not saying that he's a world champion material, right? But I think he's been doing whatever he was like needed to do. He finished second again. And yeah, he just brought it home. He didn't crash. Like, Australia was not his best moment, but still, we only had 4 races, and 3 of them were Red Bull 1-2s.
Yeah, and I mean,
So-
it's compared to last year remember when he had the period where he struggled to get out of Q2 sometimes?
All the time, you mean?
Yeah. And people were seriously questioning whether he would make it to 2024 even, but now he really seems way more consistent, and he's doing exactly what Red Bull need him to do, and that's getting the points, getting the P2, not threatening Verstappen, but so.
But I feel like it's the same for the last year or two. Perez had good starts, right? Because the car had a good gap, even last year. Like, it had a good gap, but once the pressure was more on and there was less gap to play with, like mainly in the qualifying, right? Because I think right now the Red Bull's car is the strongest in the race, and in the qualifying it's weaker, if we can call it that. And you still see, like, Perez is not qualifying like P2 right now. He qualified, what was it, like P5 or P something. So is it again a matter of time before, we start seeing these blunders of, I think there was a statistic last year that Hülkenberg got into Q3 more often than Perez, which is like unheard of. You shouldn't be doing that in a Red Bull. But yeah, is it just a question of time whether, Perez is going to fall back again? Because he had strong, last year, like the beginning as well. I don't know.
That's true. He won a race.
That's something. Yeah, exactly. He won Jeddah, right? So
yeah,
he got spanked in Miami though, but he still finished P2. So yeah, it's a difficult one. Like, it's the same thing as with Bottas and Hamilton, right? Like, except Bottas, in my opinion, he was doing a better job.
I agree. I think so too. He was. I mean, in 2021 as well. I mean, Perez did play a crucial role, and he was a great support. But overall, I would rate Bottas higher, I think.
Yeah, in 2021, I think Bottas wasn't really amazing, and I think part of it is because Hamilton had to step up a lot.
Yeah.
Because there was Verstappen. And I think both of them just, they were like level. And you had Bottas falling behind because he just couldn't match Hamilton when he was fighting someone, right? But the years before, I think that Bottas was, he had a good asset. He was a super good, he is a super good qualifier. He was never a great, a guy with a great racecraft, in my opinion. His starts were inconsistent sometimes. His race pace was not the most amazing. When he got stuck behind traffic, he never could recover. Like, he was not good at this. But he had the car that had the margin, and he always delivered in the qualifying, mostly. He was challenging Hamilton in qualifying. And that's what put him in the position that nobody could overtake him, because the car was simply faster. And I think that Perez his strength is definitely not in qualifying. He's better on tires. He's better in the race trim. And that's where the Red Bull is, strong at as well. So I think it suits him, pretty well. But we'll see. We'll see. I think China is going to be interesting in terms of this.
Yeah. And speaking of strong qualifiers, Charles Leclerc qualified P8 for Japanese Grand Prix.
Yeah.
Which came as a result of him having to burn an extra set of soft tires in Q2.
Yep.
And it really seems like, Leclerc's whole thing is his skill set is flipped on its head, because he's always been known as the qualifying master who struggles during on race day because the Ferraris have terrible tire deg. But in Japan, I mean, it was completely the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, it was a surprise for me, because when you saw Leclerc's lap, well, we all knew that he's going to go for only like a one-shot third quali, so
yeah,
I saw the sector 2, it was purple. He was like 2/10 down. I'm like, okay. But then the Ferrari, or maybe Leclerc specifically, he just lost so much time in the chicane. Like in the last chicane, he just lost so much time there. Like every single lap. It was not only that lap. And he ended up 8th. So I was like, wow. That's weird. But
the top 10 was separated by very small margins though as well. I think that he was.
I mean, that was crazy because you had Hamilton in what, P7 with a half a second gap or something like that, which is it's not bad. The year before, the Mercedes was a second down on the RB19, so yeah, but as you said, the Ferrari had an amazing pace in the race.
Yeah.
So they had, I think when I was looking at the statistics, they had either the best or second best tire wear throughout the race. And they were only, funnily enough, it was only Leclerc and one of the Haas who went for the one stop, which is such a paradox, when you looked at last year. If you would have said to anyone that Haas and Ferrari would be the only ones capable of going one stop, you'd be like, what the hell, man? No way.
Yep.
Right? Crazy.
I mean, and especially the way that things are running now at Ferrari, just the way the team operates, the strategy, it all seems much more like a well-oiled machine than last year or the years before.
We didn't have we are checking.
Exactly.
We never had it.
And that's a big thing actually. I mean, it was Charles who actually wanted to do the one stop because they were considering plan A or plan B, which was both two stop options, but Charles felt good on the tire and on the medium, and they really had very low tire drag, which helped them a lot, but Charles managed the pace, he managed the tires. I mean, got passed by Carlos at the end with new tires, but that was to be expected, I think. But still dragging it from P8 to P4. It was, I think a lot of people were expecting McLaren to be doing better. To be on the podium maybe.
I think McLaren cracked under the pressure because they boxed Lando too soon. I feel like they were worried about Russell for some reason.
Yeah.
And Mercedes too, we're going to talk about it, but Jesus, Mercedes had a stinker this race.
Yeah.
It feels like they have swapped places with Ferrari to an extent. It's been a weird weekend for Mercedes, and it's been extraordinarily good for, Ferrari in terms of execution, getting the most out of the car. Because I don't think they could challenge Red Bulls in Suzuka. We know it's high-speed circuit, and that's where the RB20 has the big advantage. But, wow, Carlos Sainz P3, Leclerc P4, and, considering their starting position, they just went up and up.
Yep.
Mainly Leclerc, and the strategy was on point in terms of, extending the first stint and just going, it was solid work.
Definitely.
Well done, Ferrari.
And Carlos Sainz being on the podium for the third time. He has a 100% podium finish rate this season so far.
Mm-hmm.
He's been on the podium every race that he's raced, and he's really showing his worth to the other teams on the field because he definitely does deserve a top seat in 2025.
Yep. And this is a proof. If nobody can see it, I think this is a good proof that Sainz is top tier driver. You cannot forget in McLaren he was beating Lando. I think both seasons they were teammates. He beat him. That's a feat because we know that Lando is a super strong driver. Ricciardo couldn't get the hang of it with him. Well, there were reasons, but he still couldn't beat him, and he was getting spanked. And Piastri is doing a good job, but I still think he has a lot to learn from Lando, mainly in the race. In terms of the tire degradation, management, and is just carrying out the race. I think he has a lot to learn. But yeah, Carlos Sainz, absolutely impressive. He's on it. He's on it.
Yeah.
I think he's the driver of the season so far.
That I definitely agree. Even, as a Leclerc fan, I have to give it to Carlos and it would be really disappointing if he either ended up without a drive or at a back marker next season, but there are not that many spots open, And would Red Bull take him to be a threat to, Verstappen potentially? Would, when they have Perez as the support, would Mercedes take him, or are they waiting for Kimi Antonelli? There are a lot of questions.
There's a lot of questions, but I think we're going to get a good answer this season, but I think it brings the question that many people ask, and I've seen so many of these questions on social media. Have Ferrari signed the wrong driver? What do you think?
I mean, no, as I said last time, I feel like the rivalry between the two camps of Ferrari fans is kind of heating up. And Leclerc also mentioned in the pre-race interviews that you're really only as good as your last race, because he had a 7-race streak where he was on the front row. And then now the past 2 races, he struggled with qualifying, which is something that he's been usually very strong at. But on the other hand, his racecraft and his strategy goals and his assertiveness, his cooperation with the team, I feel like are improving as a driver. Sainz is of course great at those as well. But I don't think they made a mistake. I don't think they've signed it wrong. I know, of course, I'm biased, but I think that if Charles manages to work on his quali performance, which I guess he hasn't really had to do in his career because it's been his strong suit, then he can take it to the top step this season.
Yeah. And would you think that Ferrari should have signed Sainz and Leclerc instead of Leclerc and Hamilton?
That's a very good question, because I don't feel like you can gauge Hamilton's true pace right now with the way Mercedes are struggling, especially, and it's gonna be we're only gonna find out in 2025, I feel like, or if Mercedes improve, because Hamilton is a 7-time world champion. He brings so much experience. He brings his brand, his personal brand as well, which is extremely lucrative for Ferrari. They gave him the position of ambassador, which I feel like he really is one of the only drivers that they could have signed instead of Carlos Sainz, because he is really good.
Well, I think you mentioned it really right, like in terms of Hamilton not showing his real potential right now. And I think one of the things that the Japanese Grand Prix failed to show or failed to play in terms of interesting radio messages, that was definitely one from Hamilton. I don't know if you noticed, but I've heard that he was, complaining is a funny word because it's Hamilton, and everybody makes fun of it. But yeah, he was, I think it was after the restart, right? He went we're going to speak about the strategy of Mercedes later, but he went side by side with Leclerc, right? And he thought, or he still thinks, that he had some damage from probably they had a contact, or maybe he went up on the curb. But he said that after, getting overtaken by Leclerc, he was having a terrible issue of understeer, that he couldn't turn the car. And that's why there was the radio message of, should I let George by? Because I don't know how you, but I was completely surprised.
Yeah.
You remember Suzuka last year, right? They were battling.
Exactly.
Absolutely, they were on it. Hamilton was not giving up. He re-overtook Russell. He just didn't give an inch. And he even pushed him off a bit. But this year was would you like to go through, sir? Open door, DRS, and bye-bye. I was like, what the hell? That's not Hamilton, right? And when you put it into perspective with the radio message, then it all makes sense, right? He had a terrible understeer, and it just went from bad to worse with Mercedes. But he was very hopeful at the start of the weekend. He was saying, the car has been in the best place it's been, for the whole 2 or 3 years, and it's been amazing, blah, blah, blah. And we were like, okay, well, Australia flashbacks, right? So they didn't apparently change the setup at all, just to see whether or not there would be any correlation between what the issues could be in the race, which is a smart thing to do. But it's concerning as well, because it just shows that they absolutely have no idea what they're doing with the car. They're using these sessions as a test, and it just, that's when there's something wrong, this is what happens. And Mercedes finished 7th and 9th, having a pretty poor strategy. The hards, we had the red flag, and we were thinking, okay, well, this is going to be interesting. Even before the red flag, right? We were like, okay, well, we have many runners on the mediums and we have Alonso on the softs, right? We were like, okay, well, what's going to happen? El Matador, right?
Yeah.
And there was nothing much into turn 1 except for Albon and Ricardo. And we had the red flag and we were thinking, well, is anybody going to try something different? And then we had both of the Mercedes, which was the weird thing, just on the hard tires. And of course, they had a pretty poor start. So Leclerc took the advantage of that. And yeah, they were holding on and then they kind of were not. And then when everybody pitted, they were just nowhere.
Yeah.
It was a strange one. I think this was it just showed how the car is so inconsistent. In one stint it's fast, in the other it's bad, and the tire wear, surprisingly, on the Mercedes was just bad. It's not what we were used to.
It was terrible. No, I saw the data, and their tire on the hard tire was horrendous. Like in comparison to Ferrari, which was amazing, of course, but even to like McLaren, Aston Martin had a surprisingly good tire wear.
Yeah.
Even though Lance Stroll was stuck in that midfield battle with the 5 cars, and he was crying into the radio, which was very funny. But yeah, Mercedes were in a really tough spot with their strategy. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing over there. It just seems very directionless.
Yeah. It felt like the strategy from like from the start, we were like, okay, well, could be interesting, right? We have something different. And then we were seeing the medium runners just kind of, losing a lot of performance in their tires. We were seeing a lot of DEG pitting pretty early, like for the Suzuka standards even. And we were like, I was like, okay, well, it's on, right? Like now the hard tires were switch on and they're just gonna go at it. Like, nope, nothing happened. Nothing happened. It was just, yeah, Russell overtook Hamilton, or Hamilton let him by, but nothing really happened then. Like, there was no pressure on, and it was all so weird, because then we were thinking, okay, are they on the 1 stop? Are they on the 2 stop, right? Like, because they had the option, like, the only ones that had the option that they could just go double hards until the end, right? And that's what I thought they were doing. Like with Russell, it made sense at the end to stop for the mediums because he was, he had the potential to catch back to Piastri and to Alonso. But with Hamilton, like, it was so weird because there was, like, if they pitted him, he was just gonna end up 9th because he had no threat from Tsunoda, obviously. And he couldn't catch a 8-second gap to the same car of Russell with no damage, right? So I felt like they should have just left him out, and the worst thing that could happen, he would still go, P9. He would maybe even box for the fastest lap, but this was it was a strange one from Mercedes, and I don't think we're really used to this team being like this. We're used to, amazing strategy calls like, Spain 2021 or Hungary 2019 when they made the extra pit stop to undercut Verstappen, right? And then to catch him and make him use his tires. And yeah, but maybe could be because of James Vowles leaving as well. The strategy team falling apart a little bit. It's weird seeing them in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, question is this a rough patch that's about to be fixed anytime now, or is this a sign of the season to come? In which case, it really feels like Hamilton can't wait to get into that red car.
Yeah, well, I think a funny thing that Hamilton was asked after the race. I don't know if you heard it, but they asked him about whether or not he's jealous of the Ferrari's results, right?
Yeah.
And he just said, "Do you have any better questions?" and left.
I feel him.
I think he's not having it.
Yeah.
He's looking forward to just throwing the keys away from the Mercedes, dropping in the Ferrari, and just having a good life. I don't know. I think he just can't wait. Obviously, he's trying his best for Mercedes because he doesn't have to, but until last race, he was just doing experimental setups and everything just to help out, And he doesn't have to do this. Russell is the one who should be doing this, because he's the one who's going to be probably taking the lead from 2025 onwards.
Yeah.
So he needs to get used to this, but yeah, it's a weird one. It just seems that Mercedes is lost, and many people say like, oh, 2026 regulations, when they come, it's going to be amazing. They're just, so much better with the engine. And the thing is, I don't think they're like, if they're losing out so much, I don't think the regulations in terms of the aero are like so different. Like, I don't think they're more different than they were from 21 to 22. So I think if they don't, sort out their issues, they're just going to struggle still.
Yep. No,
so
definitely.
It's weird.
And speaking of teams that are struggling, Sauber, Kick. I mean, they had a 1 4-second pit stop, and that was very fast by their current standards. Guan Yu Zhou had a gearbox issue, couldn't finish the race. It seems like they're not doing well still.
Yeah, I feel like qualifying was an interesting one because we had Bottas. Yeah. He was he in Q3 or
I don't
not? No, he was not. He was not.
I don't think so.
But there were glimpses of hope.
Yeah.
In that car, because when you just look at it, like straight away, right? It looks like a clear inspiration from the RB19 from last year's Red Bull, but sure as hell doesn't drive like it. But I think they even had an 8-second pit stop, didn't they? So they still have issues. Like 8 seconds, it's a lot.
Yeah,
like it's 5 seconds too much when you're on the slower end.
Yeah,
maybe even 6 seconds. Yeah,
and especially when you're stuck in a midfield battle with 5 cars, which was also another failure for Williams, who, Logan Sargent was at the front of the pack of these 5 cars. Then they went to the box, all 5 of them, and then he came out like almost last, I think. That was a very slow stop. And Yuki Tsunoda gained a few positions thanks to that, and then managed to get a point. So it really shows how important pit stops are, even for teams like this.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think it was something about their, what was it, their equipment that was not completely correct. But like, the thing is, just when you mentioned at the start of this podcast, right, Williams, people making fun of them, and it's because nobody expects you. Formula 1 is the pinnacle of motorsport.
Yeah.
We know how much money is in there. We know the budget caps. Like, of course, they have budget caps, but like, come on, it's a lot of money still. You don't expect, the teams where you need every millisecond to be losing seconds, to just be giving them away like that and not do anything about it, right? Like, you don't expect the team to not have a spare chassis, right? Because from the perspective of the fan, then you're like, like, how is this possible, right? Like, how can you do this? This is amateur. Like, if you're somebody who is not really not really deep into F1, you're like, well, you have the money.
Yeah.
You have a lot of money. You should create this third chassis because it's going to cost you so much more. And it just seems, because when you remember back to the days when you even had like a third spare car, right? You could just, destroy your first car and you can just jump into the third one and just drive away, right? And I think that's so many people just, remember or have heard of these days. And then you're just so confused. Like, how can this happen? How can you have 2 chassis only if you have 2 drivers, but when you need a third one, you just don't have it? And you used to have a third car even, or you used to have just every engine, every race, there was a new engine, or it's just, I think it's just becoming sometimes a little bit confusing when it comes to the fans. And yeah, I think even the teams themselves are a little bit confused, like what to do, because it's very difficult, like to balance the money in terms of just going straight for the performance, straight for the reliability, being safe, being on the edge. And I just feel like with the James Val's approach, they don't really care about this or next year. They just care about getting it right. I think he even mentioned it on one podcast. He just wants data. He just wants people to learn from it. He said there will be no years like these 2 years, and they just need to, get on top of everything. They need to learn from mistakes. I mean, he needs to tell that to Sargent as well, but yeah, it's just interesting that this still happens even in the, pinnacle of the motorsport. That these, I don't know, I want to call them stupid mistakes, but I think it's just these free seconds people are giving up.
Yeah. It's a very good point.
Yeah.
And I have a fun statistic to end with, maybe. And it's that Max Verstappen has reached 3,000 laps led.
Oh my god. So he surpasses Ayrton Senna.
It's possible. But I think that Suzuka was last week, about Australia, we talked about how even when Max is not winning, it can be a boring race. And now we saw that even when Max is winning, it can be an interesting race with different, strategies and, things going on behind the lead. So we can just hope to see more of interesting races and maybe also different winners this season. But it looks like Red Bull here really has, as we always say, they're nailing it, and it doesn't look like anyone is catching up.
Yeah, as you said, I feel like Japan was a much better race than Australia. Objectively speaking, of course, if you're a Carlos Sainz fan or Ferrari fan, it might have been better. And it's, of course, it's refreshing to see someone else winning, but you still want to see, you don't want to see a boring domination, even if you had 20 different winners and every single race would be a domination. It would be so weird. I don't think it would be as interesting as if you had just 2 guys, like in 2021, winning all the time, but if they were head to head, right?
Yep.
And this is what we want to see from Formula One. And I think, let's not jinx that there's no better track than China. Because I've prepared a statistic of my own. And, there is a record that the Chinese Grand Prix holds from 2016 and is the most overtakes in the dry race. It was 161 overtakes.
Okay.
It was the year of Mr. Torpedo, Daniel. Yeah. So, yeah. I think that China could be an interesting one. You have a bit of a mix of high speed, you have a mix of changing directions, which could suit Ferrari. I think that the Sector 2 will suit Ferrari pretty well, because there's a lot of, direction changes and a little bit of low speed as well. Then you have the straights, which tend to lean into Red Bull's favor, but Ferrari has proved they're also pretty fast on the straight. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be excited about. China is back.
Yeah.
China is back.
And on top of that, it hasn't been raced at for multiple years. So, and there's going to be a single free practice session before the sprint quali, the sprint shootout. So I think we're going to get some interesting results. Hopefully it'll shuffle up the field, but hey.
Yeah, sprint. Sprint could be an interesting one in China, because you have the super long straight. And is the DRS enabled on the second lap even in the sprint?
I'm not sure.
It is, I think.
Probably.
Because if it is, it's pretty interesting, because you have 2 DRS zones, and one is on the main straight, which is not too short. And you have one on the huge straight. So I think there could be good overtaking even in the sprint, which is something that does not usually happen quite often. So let's just hope we're onto a good one.
Yeah, let's hope. And we're going to talk about it right after. So stay tuned. And see you in 2 weeks.
See ya, guys. Thank you for watching and for listening.
Bye.
See ya.